The Arctic environment is currently warming at 4 times the global average rate. This heat map illustrates the projected geographic loss of permafrost across the Arctic. By 2050 and 2070, the deep red zones indicate severe, irreversible degradation of ground that has remained permanently frozen for millennia. Deep within that thawing Siberian ice, microbiologists have extracted and successfully revived dormant viral particles. The oldest of these isolates has been locked in the permafrost for 48,500 years. Thousands of miles away, the U.S. Department of Defense maintains this declassified document. It is an official, unclassified operational contingency plan titled CONPLAN 8888-11, and its stated objective is counter-zombie dominance. Neither the revived ice virus nor the military contingency plan is science fiction. One is a verified biological phenomenon, the other is a rigorous strategic framework utilized for high-level crisis response. To navigate the physical and biological fallout of the coming thaw, we have to understand the microscopic mechanics of ancient pathogens and apply the extreme military logic used to prepare for them. In 2023, a research team led by Jean-Michel Claverie successfully isolated and revived 13 new viruses belonging to 5 distinct clades from samples of ancient Siberian permafrost. These ancient virus organisms' DNA from degradation. When the ice melts and liquid water touches the particle, it reactivates. The organisms revived by the Claverie lab are strictly amoeba-infecting giant viruses. Their host is a single-celled organism called Acantha amoeba. From a mechanical standpoint, these specific isolates physically lack the surface proteins and replication machinery required to bind to or infect human or mammalian cells. But the exact species of the virus is secondary to the mechanism of its survival. The successful revival of Pandoravirus eudoma proves that deep permafrost is a highly viable preservation matrix. If an amoeba virus can survive 50 millennia in the ice, any unknown biological agent frozen alongside it can do exactly the same. This phylogenetic tree charts the genetic divergence of the revived isolates. Organisms like Pac-Man virus lupus occupy entirely distinct branches on the evolutionary tree, having evolved in isolation for tens of thousands of years. First, permafrost thaws into liquid water. The reactivated virus drifts until it is swallowed by a modern amoeba host. It hijacks the host's genetic machinery to replicate, eventually lysing or bursting the cell, releasing hundreds of new infectious particles. This cycle is not confined to isolated laboratory petri dishes. We have recent documented proof of pathogens emerging from the ice to infect mammals. In 2016, a severe heat wave hit the Yamal Peninsula in northern Russia. The temperatures thawed a reindeer carcass that had been frozen and infected with anthrax 75 years earlier. The released anthrax spores infected over 2,000 modern reindeer and hospitalized dozens of humans. The Yamal outbreak provides a direct, observed model of a spillover event. Climate-driven thaw physically mobilizes dormant pathogens and deposits them directly into modern, active ecosystems. When we zoom out from microscopic virology to macroscopic geography, the exposure vector becomes a matter of industrial infrastructure. Heavy industrial sites apply immense weight to the earth. As permafrost liquefies into mud, it destabilizes the terrain, fracturing the heavy structural supports. This satellite image shows the Red Dog zinc mine in northwestern Alaska. As the surrounding permafrost thawed, it caused severe flooding, overwhelming the mine's expansive water reservoirs and discharge systems. When industrial storage floods, it creates a toxic slurry. Runoff carrying high levels of dissolved minerals and contaminants spills outward, rapidly altering the chemical composition of local streams and watersheds. To reach precious metals, companies excavate massive open pits. This process violently churns the earth, exposing deep, ancient permafrost layers to open air and flowing water for the first time in millennia. Simultaneously, the drive for resources brings heavy machinery and human workers deep into the Arctic Circle. These crews are placed in direct, daily physical contact with freshly excavated soil. Heavy infrastructure effectively acts as a mechanical mixing bowl. It unearths ancient biological material, liquefies it, and pumps it directly into shared industrial watersheds and human populations. This high-risk exposure vector is exactly why the military's counter-zombie dominance plan holds immense strategic value. This is the official disclaimer page for Conplan 8888. The text explicitly states, this plan was not actually designed as a joke. The document was created under the Joint Operation Planning Process, or JOP. This is a framework designed to train military augmentees on how to draft and execute complex orders during widespread crises. To properly stress test logistics, command chains, and deployment speeds, the JOP requires scenarios that push systems to total failure. The zombie moniker has a precise political function. If planners draft a mock scenario about a biological attack from Tunisia or Nigeria, the public leak of that document creates a diplomatic crisis. A fictional threat bypasses geopolitical fallout while preserving the logistical stress test. By utilizing this framework, the Department of Defense is forced to build a JOPES Level 3 plan, a comprehensive blueprint for coordinating military operations during a total systemic shock to global infrastructure. The plan enforces rigid biological parameters. It tasks commanders with mass quarantines, securing critical power grids, and deploying against a novel pathogen. The human population has zero immunity. Conplan 8888 forces emergency managers to plan for total uncertainty. That is the exact structural methodology required to prepare a government for the asymmetric shock of an unknown pathogen spilling out of the permafrost. The physical collapse of the Arctic carries a compounding threat multiplier. The thawing organic matter releases massive quantities of greenhouse gases back into the atmosphere. Estimates indicate 300 to 600 million metric tons of net carbon enter the atmosphere annually from thawing permafrost. This creates a negative feedback loop. Carbon release drives temperatures higher, melting deeper ice layers, actively accelerating the release of ancient biological material. Emergency management defines this specific type of threat as a low-probability, high-consequence hazard. The odds of a direct human infection are statistically low, but the global impact of a novel pathogen is catastrophic. Yet today, a critical policy gap remains. Current international mining treaties and environmental regulations dictate heavy metal runoff and carbon limits, but they entirely omit protocols for biological pathogen exposure during deep Arctic excavation. Without integrated surveillance policies, the climate feedback loop will continue unchecked, guaranteeing widespread infrastructure collapse and a rising probability of biological exposure. To mitigate this dual threat, regulators must adopt a unified policy framework. First, surveillance. Mining operations must implement early warning biological screening systems for pathogens. Second, regulation. International treaties must be updated to restrict or ban deep industrial excavation in highly vulnerable permafrost zones. Third is global health integration. The World Health Organization must expand its response protocols by adopting the rigorous worst-case scenario framework engineered in military plans like Conplan 8888. This requires mandating international public health drills that explicitly force health ministries to build supply chains and quarantine logistics for novel zero-immunity pathogens. The near-term thawing of the Arctic permafrost is locked in by current atmospheric carbon levels. The ice will melt, and the ground will collapse. The biological material trapped inside that ice is returning to the water cycle. Governments have a narrow window to bridge the gap between microbiological research and international policy before the next global crisis surfaces from the thaw.